Hello and welcome to another episode of 7th Tier Podcast, a weekly Storybook Brawl podcast focused on strategy and high-level play. My name is Jethro, and I am joined this week and every week by your friend and mine, the best storybook player who let me have his contact details. It's Sythesys! Syth, how's it going?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's been a good week. Last Monday was my worst day of Storybook ever, but the rest of the week has been good. I'm enjoying the reset is always a bit of a weird time. You get tons of wins in a row, and that can be a lot of fun to just, crush your way up. But I'm getting to the point where I'm facing similar competition to what I was facing in Mythic last month, so kind of stabilized a bit there.
Yeah, it's reset week. Reset week is always an exciting time. Have you hit Mythic yet?
No, I have not yet, but should be there by next week for sure. It usually takes me about 10 days. I just don't play that much. I've only played 30 games this patch.
Hopefully that'll be live on stream. That'll be sweet.
Absolutely.
We've got a packed show for you today. We're going to be diving deep on the two best heroes in the game, Syth's S tier at the top of the tier list. But before all that, we've got some stats to dive into. I'll go first. I was trying to alternate who goes first on stats. I've now completely forgotten where I was in that.
It was definitely me last week, so.
In the last 7 days, I've played 71 games with 50 top 4s and 16 crowns for an average finish of 3.47. So pretty consistent top 4 conversion, not great crown conversion, which is what I sort of expect playing on the ladder, because I want to defend my points more than I want to aggressively gain them. So I've been playing fairly defensively.
Sure, I think that makes sense at the start of the ladder where you get a ton of bonus points and you're actually gaining rep at 4. Like when you get near the top and 3 is a loss, you need to play very differently. But that makes a ton of sense where you're at right now. I played 53 games this week. Probably my lowest average I've had on this podcast, 3.24, with 18 crowns and 36 top 4s. Yeah, I had a rough day on Monday, but otherwise pretty normal stats otherwise.
I knew, because you wrote to us that you had a rough day last Monday, and I should have taken this as my opportunity to have better stats than you on the podcast and really gone for it this week, as it's a huge punt on my part. Any heroes or strategies standing out to you in the last 7 days?
Merlin is one that I've been pushing quite hard this week. I know I mentioned him before, but he continues to be like a really top performer. I think I've got much more comfortable with the Merlin gameplay pattern, when you're meant to cast spells, when you're meant to buy Wizard's Familiars, when you're meant to ignore Wizard's Familiars and Spellweavers, and kind of finding the line of, yes, I'm planning to cast a lot of spells, but am I going all in on a hatball-esque strategy? And finding that line is something I've got much more comfortable with.
What do you do as Merlin when you're not doing as we discussed last week and going all in on like a mage's crystal ball based thing?
Happy Little Tree is actually one of the better minions with Merlin in a similar way to Charon. It's a minion that gets a ton of health and only needs 1 or 2 triggers. If you get it to 5 attack, the amount that a 5/15 is better than a 2/15 is just... It's like 3 times as good. It's a huge increase to a unit with a lot of health. So that can definitely be part of it.
That makes a lot of sense. You're getting extra value out of those stats because you're dealing that 5 damage 3 or 4 times over the course of a game because it takes that long to take down your tree.
Absolutely. And then, Happy Little Tree is a unit that, leads quite nicely into Heartwood Elder, into Shoulder Fairies, into Echowood, into the kind of normal tree late game. It's just hard to justify Happy Little Tree if you don't have a way to give it extra power in the early game. Merlin is one of the ways you can do that. Less consistently, probably, than Charon, but it's a backup strat, not your primary strat. And then otherwise, things like Friendly Spirit are just fine as well. Just anything that doubles down, wombats, anything that can double down on those stats at, +2/+1 every turn it's not as many stats as things like Fallen Angel, who can provide a ton of stats up front, but over the course of the game, if you make sure you're selling your minions aggressively so the buffs aren't wasted, it can add up and just be, oh yeah, some middling stats. This is almost as many stats as Mad Catter. This is fine. Just be some stats.
That's certainly the big level up for me as Merlin, is figuring out, oh, this chicken shouldn't be in my hand while I'm playing this lucky coin.
Absolutely.
I was going to mention Fallen Angel actually as another hero that's great with the Happy Little Tree. I found myself taking Happy Little Trees a lot in the last week, and part of that's that I've been playing a bunch of Fallen Angel and a bunch of Charon. And those are, I think, the 3 heroes with whom you should take Happy Little Tree, and everyone else you can basically ignore it.
2 other heroes I want to mention quickly. Headless Horseman. On your recommendation, I have been trying Headless Horseman, and you know what? I've had some good success. I played him 4 times with 2 crowns, which is saying quite a lot. Anyway, one of those was a ridiculous. I stole a golden chicken on turn 2 from a Wonder Waddle, which was
that's so good.
just cheating. Like, yeah, won that game unbelievably easily. But yeah, I have definitely come around to Headless Horseman, mostly just a really aggressively casting the kidnaps. I don't hold them. I just go turn 1, turn 3, probably turn 4, just fire them off, get that value, and use that strength to turn it into leveling and scaling later on. Holding one for the late game, especially now people don't put good boys in slot 1 very often. It's not much of a strategy.
You can find a kidnap anyway if you really need one, or a glimpse of thieving by the late game.
The other hero I want to mention is Apocalypse, where I have had a lot less success. For a long time, Apocalypse was like just my best hero ever by a lot. And I finally had games where I don't get there. Like, I used to think, oh, I don't understand how people are ever naturally leveling to 6. You just always find XP on 5.1 or 5.2. And you know what? I've had those misses, and it really sucks. Like, even if you think you're relatively strong, if you don't, you can get to that 5.2 if you don't start that turn with 17 gold, 6 random minions, 7 random minions, sometimes not enough to instantly stabilize you. You lose one fight on that transition turn, and you were struggling anyway. You're Apocalypse. That can be enough to finish you off. So I've come down a little bit of Apocalypse. I still think he's a really good hero, still A tier or whatever, but not wow best hero ever by a lot sort of status.
You can make the wrong call as Apocalypse as well. Like if you're on 5.0 or 4.2 even, and you're like, well, I don't really want to invest in many more minions at this point. I think my characters are fine. I'm on 33 health. But then if you don't get the XP, it's like, oh, I'm dead. I think people have learned how to play against Apocalypse a bit better as well. I think you're more likely to find people going, oh, I'm playing against Apocalypse, let's play a cat's call and make sure they die.
Yeah, I think the meta has also sped it up just a little bit. People are playing, when the patch first dropped, people were playing, a ton of late game heroes came out. Grandmother got more exciting, Muerte got more exciting, Self-Hero got more exciting, and people are kind of leaning back into, we know how good these heroes are, we're going to play the good heroes again, rather than trying the new stuff to some extent, because it's been a while since the patch now.
The other thing I wanted to say about Apocalypse is that when you do get there, by which I mean get to tier 6, the most common thing I find myself going into at that point is Scam, just because it's easy if you've already got a pumpkin, you're likely to see some more 6-drops in the shop, and you can fill out a board from there. And I think that Pumpkin Scam might be the worst endgame comp at the moment.
Yeah,
I've had a couple of 4th places with Apocalypse where I was like, I felt like I got there, but then it turned out I was just weaker than some Bearsteins.
Pumpkin is relatively treasure dependent. Like, you really need something giving your summon stats, whether that's Summoning Portal or even just like a Ring of Rage. Just something to make sure that the units you're summoning aren't vanilla Baba Yagas or whatever, which can be a little disappointing. Whereas Apocalypse often is relatively treasure light. You are looking for treasures, but you're also prioritizing experience, and sometimes you don't have that many treasures when you hit. I agree that I often end up kind of scamming. A Grumblegore, a Doom Breath, a Pumpkin is a good reason to go there. But you can also definitely do good boy stuff. A Grumblegore and a good boy is a good enough start, and there are still as many good units as there are evil units on tier 6, roughly. And trees. There's also like 6 trees. There's so many trees. You can end up trees fairly often as well.
Hero I most want to talk about with you is Peter Pants. I noticed from your tier list that they're in 4th right now as like one of your absolute top heroes.
Yep. Since the patch, they are my number 1 hero. They with 7 times played, average placement of 2.14, 2 crowns, and I've never failed to top 4.
That's absurd to me. So since the patch, they're my 10th best hero, 20 times played, but 8 bottom 4s. Okay. 3 crowns. Pants for me feels absolutely like a coin flip.
Statistically, for me, it's not flipping coins. Top 4 every time. I'm upset when I don't get top 4 because I have found his game plan very consistent. You're stronger than average right from turn 1. That's actually one of the first things I want to mention is that on turn 1, you are stronger than average. You only get to buy, you're only going to be offered 1 2-drop usually. Sometimes you'll get a choice. But because you can hit better spells, you can hit Falling Stars, you can hit Candy Rain on turn 1, and those are meaningful increases that will consistently win you that first fight. Like, it is a small statistical advantage that gives you a slightly more likely to win on turn 1, not a big increase, but you do 4 damage if you win that first fight, and then right from turn 2, you buy your first 3-drop minion, and you are way ahead of the competition, right? Everyone else gets to buy a 2-drop and a spell, you get to buy a Brave Princess, and be miles ahead. Buy a Vainpire, like, so, you're it's the skip level of, actually, a 3-drop can be pretty good.
Yeah, but when we were talking about skip a couple of weeks back, you were like, what if you get offered a shop of all 2s as skip on turn 2? And I've had that as pants multiple times, and it's gross.
You get to lock as pants. You get to, like, again, this is like old skip, where you get to lock your shop on turn 1. The odds that you're offered all 2s and then all 2s almost never happened.
But there's plenty of 3s you don't lock on turn 1. Are you locking any 3-drop?
No, I'm not locking Spellweaver or like Sleeping Princess. But again, like with skip, I'm looking at a decent number of them.
Are you locking Queen of Hearts? Are you locking Darkwood Creeper?
Queen of Hearts, yes, if I have an evil minion to go with her. That's one of the big differences with skip, is that the number of minions I'm willing to take goes up, because if I get a support that goes with it, that's incredible. Like, I will sometimes lock Sleeping Princess if I took a Mim turn 1. Like, that's a thing that can happen. Like, because you not only get access to all these 3s, and I don't always lock, by no means do I always lock, but the odds that you find nothing you want to lock and then see 3 more minions you never lock, the reason skip used to be S tier is that just didn't happen that often, when you got to see twice as many minions.
I promise I'm not just throwing out random 3s here. I'm trying to find this line between them. Would you lock a Romeo? It's just a vanilla 5/3?
Yeah. I probably wouldn't lock it, if I'm honest. I would probably let that go.
Because Romeo's not a high roll. It's not something you're excited to triple.
It will probably win you that fight, though, right? I think that's one of like, I will take it if I'm offered it over any 2-drop, certainly. And a 5/3 does tend to double trade. Like, units are like 2/2s and 2/3s on that turn mostly. And if Romeo kills 2 of their minions, they've probably only got 2 minions. And then, like, on tier 3, you're still consistently stronger than everyone else. All of your minions that you're buying have +1/+1 relative to your opponents. You just continue to be, like, that's not as good as, like, Fallen Angel, where all the units have +2/+2, but it's a lot better than the people who don't have hero powers. And you're a little more likely to have found an early 3-drop triple, because you've been buying 3-drops since, like, you can, on what is 3.0 for everyone else, you can have 3, maybe even 4 3-drops already. And then that's a ton of likelihood to find a pair and then lead that into triples, which is really the core of course, of Peter Pan's gameplay, is trying to find those 3-drop triples really aggressively. I don't tend to take units I don't like and try and triple of them unless I'm offered like 2 at a time in the shop. So I'm not buying random Shadow Assassins without a spell or another Slay minion. I'm not buying Queen of Hearts with no evil units. I'm not even... This, I think, is something that a lot of Peter Pans do that I don't. I don't buy Spellweavers either.
Okay, that's very different to how I play. That's the first thing you've come across where I'm like, wait, I do buy Spellweaver.
I think Spellweaver is up there with Shadow Assassin as just one of the weakest units on that tier. It's just, like, a 1/3 range is, like, incredibly bad. And until I assemble... Obviously, I'm looking to assemble Hatball. Again, this is the late game plan of Peter Pan's. Is like 80% of my games, I'm aggressively pursuing Hatball the entire time.
Mm-hmm. And before then, you're not casting spells?
Before then, no. If I have a hat, I'm casting spells. But even if I've just got a ball, I don't buy spells. Why would I buy spells? They cost gold. I want triples, and I want to get to my late game, which is so, like, monumental levels of scaling. Similar with Wizards Familiars, I don't tend to want to pair up 2-drops as Peter Pants. I don't even take Cinderella that highly.
No, I don't take Cinderella until I'm going off as Peter Pan.
Like, I don't... Yes, this is a minion I want later, but once you're hatballing, it just doesn't matter. Like, it does eventually. You do then want to pick up Spellweavers, you do want to pick up Animal Familiars, but the fact they've missed out on the first, like, 7 turns of you casting 1 spell a turn is tiny, because now I'm casting 14 spells every turn, and it doesn't matter that they start as a 1/3, they get there so quickly. So yeah, I'm not looking to pick up minions. I'm just going for early strength. I'm just, like, my highest pick is probably, like, on turn 2 it's probably Prized Pig, but then, like, it's pigs and it's stags and it's even Princess White, who is just a 2/4 that can very, very quickly become bigger than that. Just, I want the most stats, win my fights, aggressively buy 3-drops, and figure it out from there. Not Spellweavers and Animal Familiars, the units that I will eventually want. Because, again, most of these 3-drops are going to get kissed, mixed-wizzled. They're not going to, like, it's fine that they're early game. Like, Stag is a really good example. It's so strong early and then falls off a cliff once it can no longer consistently attack, based on positioning, based on the fact you can't run 6 units anymore. But Peter Pants is such a good hero for turning units that were good into something relevant later with these transformation spells. And so, I'm not looking for scaling units. I'm just trying to be strong, and then I'll figure it out, and I do figure it out.
Yes, there's a graph in the show notes of hatball odds.
So the odds on hatball. So by the time you found 5 triples, you're looking about 60%, and once you get to 6 3-drop triples, you're looking about 75%, presuming that you're picking treasures at replacement level. So whenever you take a treasure, you're then replacing it with something else. Even if it's not a treasure you want. Even if it's not hatball, you just take a sting to replace your bad moon, because who cares? They're not hatball, but get them out of the pool. Increase my odds. And it can increase your odds by a decent amount. It's like a 10% increase by the time you're at 6 treasures.
Well, what's interesting about the treasure replacement thing is that the first one is only worth like 2.6%.
Yeah, that is true.
And there definitely are options. This is rare. I want to highlight that for our listeners. This is rare that this comes up. 99% always take that treasure. There are times when if your treasures are like a Haunted Helm for plus 10 toughness and the Sting for plus 10 attack and the Crystal Ball, and you're offered the Bad Moon and the Cloak of the Assassin and the Eye of Ares.
Yeah. And you've got a triply in slot 1 loving those treasures you've got. Yeah, you can definitely get in those situations where skipping can be better because it is a huge power loss. And again, it's not a massive increase, so...
Yes. Actually, losing another fight is worse than the 2.5% downgrade.
You got to make those decisions a little bit on the fly, but usually I would look... The default is replace. It is also worth the treasure map kind of ruins that math a bit. You never have to treasure map, but you probably should if you don't have hat or ball. If you have one of them, I'm a little less likely to take.
I'll take a treasure map if I've got ball and I've got 1 or 2 mice already.
Yes, I was going to say mice is the key there. Is yes, if I've got at least 1 mouse, then treasure map becomes much more appealing. Without it, a 5-drop treasure is good. All of the 5-drop treasures are worse than the other half of hatball. That's definitely for sure.
The problem I have with 5-drop treasures is there's only like 5 of them that will pull you back from behind. And so there's a 15% chance that the 5-drop treasure doesn't help.
There are at least 3 of them that are straight up blank. Hand of Midas, Staff of the Old Toad, and Ninth Book of Merlin are all just complete trash. They don't have no text, but you're not interested at all. Ambrosia also not good. So the high rolls are definitely there. Monkey's Paw, Exploding Mittens, Dracula Saber, even Helm the Ugly Gosling can be like unbelievably strong treasures, especially early.
Even Sword of Fire and Ice.
Yeah. Even Mimic as well. A bunch of them can get there. But the fact that there's a good chance of missing is scary. 6-drop treasures, that's less true of. There are only 9 of these, and one of them is in Beginning Stone, which is unreal. And the rest of them tend to be pretty good. Obviously, you have the Ark as an actual blank, but most of them are really solid. And so if you can get 6-drop treasures, that's much bigger appeal than the 5-drop treasures.
Yeah, I think looking at these, the Ark and Evil Eye are the only 2 blanks, and maybe you're forced to take Pandora's Box over those and flip the coin.
Yeah.
The problem with Mimic is while it can be really good and definitely has a lot of text once you've assembled Hatball, it doesn't catch you up from behind.
No.
If you're taking the contingency plan out of Treasure Map into a 5-drop treasure, Mimic's not going to catch you back up.
No, that's certainly true. Yeah, I think that's really most of what I have to say about Peter Pants is don't aggressively, yes, your late game plan is all these mages, but don't play like your Merlin or whatever. Play like your Wonder Waddle or no, play like your Celestial Tiger. All you care about is pairing up these 3-drops and not being dead. You actually have one of the better late games. Maybe you probably won't beat the person who actually assembles the nuts. You can't beat thousands, but you can beat hundreds pretty consistently. And so you're okay to play to late game. Make sure you're strong early. It's almost inevitable, right? 6 treasures is very achievable on this hero, and then you're 80% to have hit. You can work with those odds. If you can get to 7 treasures, it's 85. It gets very, very good and almost inevitable at some point. And yeah, just so play for strength, become mages later. Don't cast too many spells when they're not super relevant. Still cast Wormroot on your mummy, cast the good buff spells. That's all fine. If they actually give you strength, go for it. But don't play like you're Merlin the whole time.
So my first question, and this might be something that I've been doing wrong on Peter Pants, is I value really highly the economy units as 3-drops. The Prized Pig, the Lucky, and the Ogre Princess as just ways to get more value on those opening turns because you need more shots at 3-drops. And I've found myself dying after 4 or 5 treasures. I don't get to 7 very often.
Certainly, well, everyone else is still tier 2. Prize Pig is just the biggest thing anyway. Prize Pig is the best thing you can find when everything else is turn 2, is it actually just beats most opponents if they don't have eggs, and then also happens to give you 2 gold. Like, Pig is crazy good at that stage. Lucky No Princess, that's definitely less true. Like, Lucky has the same stats as Dragon in the combat or whatever, right? He has an Ogre Princess similarly. They've got the same stats as a 2-drop. They are not consistently winning you those fights. Until eventually you hit tier 3 and they got +1/+1 and they're a little bit better. But sometimes that can be super worth it. You know, they both... Lucky effectively always lets you buy something, either a 3-drop that you want or a 2-drop that you can immediately sell for a gold. Ogre Princess is almost exactly the same text.
Yeah.
But she needs to slay, so I actually do prefer Lucky to Ogre Princess a decent amount. Like Lucky I think I would pick decently highly. Ogre Princess I'm kind of medium on without like a good support.
Without a mim or some way of actually pushing it through.
A good witch, yeah. Even then, yeah, I'm relatively low on Ogre Princess. Unlike Skip, I don't think you desperately need that economy as Peter Pants because you're not a turn behind. You're just kind of ahead. And you aren't... The issue with Skip is that he then levels up to 4 and has like 7 gold to buy a 4-drop. Like, ideally 2 4-drops, but he's only got 7 gold and he can't really afford to sell anything. So any economy is a huge boon to him. That doesn't happen with Peter Pants. I'm staying on 3. My units aren't getting more expensive. I'm just getting more money. I don't need to have that economy as I head upwards. Pig's still good though, you know.
Another one of the problems I've had with Peter Pants, and this is slightly less true now because I had 3 great games with them end of yesterday. But midway through yesterday, I thought we should talk about this on the podcast. So I went and had a deep dive into my stats. And on my stats page, I record, as we talk about on the podcast, placement, plus or minus to rating, and like a little bit of text about what I did that game. If it was dwarves or royals or copy boy or hatball. And so I looked at Peter Pants, and at that point in time, my average finish with Peter Pants was exactly 4.0, and my finish when I assembled hatball was 3.58.
Ooh.
There has just been, especially on this patch, and especially actually on the ladder, a bunch of games for me as Pants where I assemble the hatball and then immediately die and come 5th. Or, and this was novel to me the other day, I assemble hatball, knock 2 people out of the game, and then die and come 4th. That seemed insane to me. I'd had 3 turns of just casting every spell in the shop, feeling like I was massively growing in power level. And it occurs to me listening to you talk about Pants, that even after you get there, after you get your 40% of getting the hatball in the first 4 treasures, or was it 65 to get them in the first 5?
Yeah.
You're still flipping coins because you might never see a kiss in the shop, or you might mix Wizzle or kiss into something that's actually not that great for you. Oh, it's a 32/32 Echo Wood. This is nothing. Yeah, actually, I was better off when this was a stag.
Sure. Flipping coins is a little disingenuous. Certainly, you know, Echo Wood is the worst of the 6-drops by a lot. You know, the average stats on a 6-drop is significantly higher than that. But yeah, there definitely is. I have assembled hatballed and spent 8 gold rolling without finding a targeted spell. It can happen. But I also think if you've been playing for strength, right? This is what I'm saying is don't take... Like, I'm still trying to assemble the triples of units that I actually want to play, right? Like, I'm picking the white stags and the pigs and I'm less likely to pick Darkwood Creepers or whatever, which is just a kind of a bad unit. I'm playing for strength in the mid game so that when I do find that hatball, I'm still relatively okay. You know, my units aren't huge once everyone else is tier 5. They're okay once everyone else is tier 5. My triples are like 10/10s. That's pretty normal. They've got 2+2+2 from my hero power, and yeah, my units are all 10/10s. That's about as big as anyone else is going to get on tier 5 most of the time. Once people hit tier 6, yeah, they're much bigger than me, but I'm hoping to have been hatball at least a little bit by that point. Yeah, I'm playing for mid-game strength, and then once you're hatball, if you actually have the combination of hat and ball, you really do get so many spell casts. It's really like if you are maximizing your odds as well, you've got an evil unit, you've got a good unit, you've got a tree, you've got a princess, you've got a monster. You're making sure that no matter what spell you hit, you are able to cast it. Moving stats around is fine. None of my units baseline are very strong. They keep all the Peter Pants buffs, they keep all the spell-based buffs. My units like baseline a 2-1 or a 2-3. They're not making them bigger, making them a tier higher. It's really hard for them to be smaller. They might not massively improve. You are definitely sometimes high rolling and hoping you hit Aeon and Storm Kings. But again, the combination of it's like taking a random 5-drop treasure. It's actually a really fairly strong correlation there where, yeah, if you focus on the negatives, you can absolutely miss. Like, you can be offered 3-5 drops and they actually have no text and you've wasted a huge amount of time and set yourself back massively. But realistically, on average, you just gain a ton. It's a lot of extra stats. It's great keywords like ranged, and you can stop once you find something good. You know, it's not like you then I found an Aeon and now I have to kiss him again. Just it's fine. Stick with your Aeon and kiss something else. You should have other targets. It's you can just go up that ladder, stop when you're comfortable with the unit, and kiss something else. And I have absolutely had games where I've been never offered a kiss, and I'm stuck with just Spellweavers and Animal Familiars as my scaling, and those are the games you don't come first, definitely, unless you also do something like Gloves of Thieving, kidnapping stuff. But there are other outs, there are other ways to play, and the general stats is certainly enough that you should be tier 4 in most lobbies, I think. Certainly that's what my stats say.
The other thing I want to stress, especially following on from our episode last week, is that Pants' Hatball is a lot worse than a Potion Master or Merlin's Hatball. Okay, Maz just made like an insane face.
Unbelievable disagree. That's insane to me. Most of the targeted spells, like so there are 22 targeted spells in the game, and 11 of them are tier 2 or 3. Like, your 11 out of the 26 spells are targeted at tier 2 and 3. You have really good odds. Way better odds than someone who's tier 6 of hitting targeted spells. And significantly better than because the targeted spells at tier 6 include things like Crocbait and Knighthood, which are not actually particularly strong when hatballing. They're lower impact. You're definitely missing out on, like, you're sad to missing out on Stone Skin and Burning Palm. Those are very strong spells that you don't get to cast. But again, Hatball is usually about, we've talked last week about quantity over quality. I'm happy to cast Magic Research. Magic Research is completely fine. Obviously it's a garbage spell, but I'm here for triggers. Yeah, you're more likely to find targeted spells. That's actually, I think, an upside of Peter Pants with Hatball.
Those figures are true, and I think if you look at just those figures, you definitely are more likely to find more targeted spells. There are 3 things they don't take into account. Lucky Coin, which means that on tier 6, you actually have closer to 12.5, 13 average gold per turn. I don't know the maths, but you do see Lucky Coin a fair bit, especially if you're seeing more spells because of Hatball. Feed the Kraken, which we mentioned last week, was an enormous part of Hatball's economy. And if you've got a Forking Rod or a Wand of Weirding going on, then you can get an insane amount of gold out of Feed the Krakens. And it just lets you go off so much longer. And Drink Me Potion.
And then Drink Me, yeah. Drink Me is definitely one of the big ones for sure. Yeah, I agree that you definitely have less of that economy. That is certainly true. Your economy needs to come from the fact that your units are super cheap, right? The economy you're gaining is the fact that
you don't have to spend 6 gold on your Storm King.
Yeah, like you get to spend 12 gold just rolling, and you get to buy like 9/9s from the shop if that's the thing you still need. You know, when I buy my doubly, it is a 9/9, it's an 11/11, and that's still only costs 3 somehow. It's not the cost of a Nyan. The other thing is that you're like twice as likely to find True Love's Kiss. It's True Love's Kiss is one of the highest impact spells. Maybe not as good for like going infinite, but going infinite's not really practical. I often have extra gold at the end of my Hatball turns, even as Peter Pants. Like, cash can matter, but it's hard to make good use of. Especially if you've got Fork. If you've got the Fork, you have infinite. You might as well have infinite cash. You're never casting with your spells. It's impossible. It's so hard. Yeah, twice as likely to find Mix Whistle and Kiss is really nice, for sure.
Finally, I want to mention something that I realised while on this call, while on hatball.com, which is that Queen's Grace is a level 4 spell, and so you don't need a royal as Peter Pants. There's nothing that says target a prince or princess at levels 2 and 3.
Interesting. That's not a decision I've ever consciously made. Like I'm not sure I've ever gone, oh, I'll pick up a royal as Peter Pants.
I might say, oh, it's good not to kiss this sleeping princess, she's my last royal, or whatever.
I might have done that, yes. So yeah, that isn't something I had put together and is definitely worth having said out loud once.
I'm going to think about that on my next Hatball turn. Moving on to our main topic, we are going down the rabbit warren today and talking about Wonder Waddle and Pied Piper. These are, we believe, the best two heroes in the game. So to refresh Pied Piper, you get an additional character in every shop. It's an animal, and it has +1/+1. Wonder Waddle, you're level 2 and 3 animals. You only need 2 of them in order to get a triple, and then you get a treasure and you preserve all the stats on both of those 2.
Yeah.
These heroes are both great.
Yeah, so let's talk about them first in terms of just what's the base level, which units are the most on tier 2, what are we doing with these heroes?
Yeah, so a game started, you're playing Waddle or Piper, what are you hoping to see in that first shot?
Yeah, so certainly as Wonder Waddle, the dream is mice, blind mice. The ability to get a tier 4 treasure as early as turn 2 with Wonder Waddle is a huge part of why he's extremely, extremely strong. There are plenty of tier 4 treasures that start you scaling straight away. Plenty of them are just unbelievable amounts of stats as well. Like if you get a coin of Charon, you might lose a couple of fights, but then in 3 turns time you got an extra +12/+12, and that's ridiculous. But have you ever played against someone with a 6 of shields that early? You can't ever kill any of their units, and it's horrible. Yeah, you can get a ton of early advantage from basically all of the tier 4 treasures, and the ability to do that right from turn 2 potentially is very, very strong.
Since we're starting off there, which tier 4 treasures, you've mentioned shields, coin of Charon.
Yep.
Are there any tier 4 treasures that you really don't want that aren't even visible to you in the super early game?
Sky Castle is definitely one of them. I'm heavily invested in these animals unless I already happen to have some frog princes. Sky Castle is not a direction I tend to be wanting to go in. Deck of Many Things is worse than it looks, because until you hit tier 4, it can only cast Earthquake and Falling Stars. We've mentioned this before on the podcast, but that is definitely extremely underwhelming, though it gets there eventually. And Reduplicator is the other one. An extra 1/1 off my Black Cat is nothing, and I'm not heading towards Romeo and Juliet. It's going to be forever until I get a Wombats in Disguise. Reduplicator is just a very small amount of stats compared to the other treasures here.
I'm not going to hypergeometric it, but that's basically a 1% that you completely miss on your blind mice. That just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And even then, you can just take a Sky Castle and pivot if you have to. Do whatever. Yeah, and then, so that's what I would really want mice, but any animal is totally fine. There is no animal. I wouldn't always take Kitty Cutpurse immediately because the unit's quite weak, but I'm more likely to take it than normal. And most of the other animals are just completely fine turn 1, turn 2 buys that, if they triple, immediately make you quite strong.
A lot of the tier 2 animals are the animals you're buying on that tier anyway. It's the unicorns and the Billy Gruffs for stats. It's the chicken because it's a savings account.
Yeah. Chicken actually is definitely worth mentioning. Chicken is often a unit that you buy and then sell very, very quickly. I am a little more likely to hold on to chickens as Wonder Waddle because you do profit when you triple it, which isn't normally true. You're actually straight up 2 gold whenever you triple a chicken, and even if you take the treasure, you're neutral on the gold. So holding on to chickens, playing them in the early game, a 2/2 is fine. Most units at that tier are an average of a 2/2. Hold on to your chickens, don't just sell them for... Selling a chicken for a sure shot is like a totally fine play on most heroes, because a 2/1 ranged is meaningfully better than a 2/2. That's probably not true as Wonder Waddle. Just hold on to it for a little bit longer. Don't stay attached to it. but it's worth holding on to just a little bit longer. So that's kind of Wonder Waddle's early game. Pied Piper, I am buying the unit with +1/+1. I basically don't care what it is. Again, we were just saying the tier 2 animals are units that I'm relatively interested in, and a ton of them are magnitudes better with +1/+1. Part of the big reason that Mrs. Claus was ever playable is how good Rainbow Unicorn is with +1/+1, and Pied Piper just gets that as well as having a really good hero power. The only ones that I kind of don't snap by are Wizard's Familiar. You don't tend to cast a lot of spells as Pied Piper, you're just buying a lot of animals and kind of trying to assemble triples and stuff. Wizard's Familiar doesn't grow that big, and it's just a 2/2. And Black Cat doesn't benefit as much as it normally would. It's a 2/2 that comes with a 1/1, which is more stats than, again, an average 2-drop. But you don't tend to want to pick up Mims. I don't want to go in a kind of evil queen direction, generally speaking. I want to still just be buying animal triples and so on. And so that isn't the best ever. But yeah, generally the units with +1/+1 are better than the units that don't have it. Actually, one of the other things I'm trying to do as Wonder Waddle, not as Wonder Waddle, one of the things I'm hoping to see as Pied Piper is free rolls, because you get another look at another unit with a buff. Certainly on on the third turn, 2.2, being able to buy a buffed unit, free roll, and then buy another buffed unit is super sick. Like, it's really good. And that's really strong.
Yeah, you're getting max value out of those +1/+1s. I was going to quickly mention locking the shop as Pied Piper. If you buy a buff unit and lock the shop, you will get a new buff unit into that shop.
Even if you don't, if you buy a non-buffed unit, you still get a buffed unit. The adding shop algorithm prioritizes at all points adding a buffed unit over an unbuffed unit. And that's also true when you go up tiers, and you would normally be offered one extra unit in the shop. If you've locked, again, the new slot that gets added will always be a buffed unit.
Really, really good to know. I also want to mention mice as Piper as well, that because you're getting that extra animal in every shop, it's that much easier to triple them. Yes, you still need to find 3, but you can often triple them by 3.1, and that's still super early to be getting a 4-drop treasure. It's still going to be enough to pivot around.
Yeah, and the maths on finding that is very positive. An extra shot from a massively reduced pool is a huge so say we're tier 3, we're still looking for one more mouse, so at that point there's 11 animals, so there's an extra 9% chance of finding a mouse in every single shop. You see a lot of shops, that's good odds. You won't always get there, but you're so much more likely to than average. And this is a very niche fact that almost never matters, but the Pied Piper minion doesn't come from the pool. The Pied Piper minion is generated wholesale regardless of what other minions have been purchased. And so even if someone is holding a bunch of mice, you're still as likely to get more mice.
That's an incredible fact to me that is so unlikely to be relevant, but that I will think about every time. And so we've moved on to tier 3 now. So we've collected our 2-drops. Maybe we've got there with some mice, but maybe we haven't. We've probably definitely got some stats going on as Pied Piper. What are we looking for now as Wonder Waddle? What's our ideal 3.0 shop?
It's the same for Pied Piper and Wonder Waddle. You want stags and pigs. They're both some of the strongest tier 3 units. They're even better for you. It does mean traveling them can be a little tricky because they're also the best. Like, White Stag, I think, is generically the strongest 3-drop. I guess I would buy Brave Princess over it on exactly 3.0.
White Stag has so many stats on 3.
But yeah, no, those are the good units. You want them even more than everyone else. And certainly as Pied Piper, you're more likely to find them than anyone else. Donkey is also here. I think that's a fair description of Donkey.
Nothing has ever summed up a donkey more perfectly than the Trojan donkeys. This is the 3-drop 2/6 that when they survive damage, they summon a random character of your level or below.
It's another unit that is much better with +1/+1. A 3/7 is leagues ahead of a 2/6 because it gets those value trades. And you can support it. Buying a good support is not unreasonable if you already had a White Stag. You can definitely, you've got a White Stag and a Rainbow Unicorn, so you buy Good Witch of the North, and now Donkey is a good unit that can go with that. Not a primary game plan, but especially on, if you're really looking for hatball on Wonder Waddle, which is a big part of his game plan that we'll cover it momentarily, Trojan Donkey is an extra 1/3 of the units you're looking for. If you're just looking for pigs and stags, adding Trojan Donkey is a 50% increase to the units you're looking for.
And Trojan Donkey, because it's a much worse unit to start with, you're slightly more likely to be seeing them in the shop. But that being said, although it is much worse than Stag and Pig, I still see them a lot. So,
yeah,
it can't be that big of a difference.
Yeah. And then really, certainly on Wonder Waddle, it's worth mentioning, Wonder Waddle often plays a little bit like Peter Pants, where you can find a whole lot of 3-drop treasures. Because you only need 2 pigs, 2 stags, or 2 donkeys to make a treasure happen, you have one of the best access to finding 3-drop treasures over and over again. And given that there is this almost, this S-tier level of combination with hat and ball, and there are backup hats, the odds that you just find Crystal Ball, maybe that's all you need, and you get a lot of looks at it. Way more than average looks at it. And that's a big part of my plan as Wonder Waddle. Not every game, certainly. But my default actually is mages, and not some kind of animal strategy as Wonder Waddle.
In terms of the treasures more generally as Wonder Waddle, because I realised we didn't talk about the 2-drop treasures at all, we just talked about the 4s, assuming we're tripling mice all the time. Because you're getting this glut of treasures super early, the most important treasures to me as Wonder Waddle are the meta treasures. Your runestones and your treasure maps. Because that's going to let you super accelerate, get an aggro monkey's paw or an aggro 6-drop treasure.
Yes, especially when combined with the mice, right? It is really good access to those extremely high-level treasures. A few other 2-drops stand out. I mean, anything that gives you early power could just let you coast. Even like Shepherd's Sling, especially as Wonder Waddle, you're planning to buy a lot of 2-drops and 3-drops, even when you're on tier 4, Shepherd's Sling is going to be really good. I think one to to point out as bad is Corrupted Heartwood. You can easily trick yourself into thinking, yeah, animals. I'm doing animals. This gives my animals all +1 attack. And then you realise it's just a worse dancing sword, because being evil is very likely irrelevant. And actually, I wanted quite a lot of my animals to be good. And treants aren't important. Yeah, Corrupted Heartwood, probably the worst treasure in the game, and not good even when you're specifically doing the thing it wants you to be doing. So don't fall into that trap.
We've got to mention the second best tier 2 treasure, which is skip and take the gold.
Yes. Yeah.
As Wonder Waddle, you haven't cost yourself anything. As a regular, any other hero in the game, gluing 3 guys together costs you some board position. You've lost stats on that exchange, and the treasure's going to help you make up those stats. As Wonder Waddle, 2 mice together, instead of 2 2/2s, you've got 1 4/4. It's slightly more vulnerable, maybe to something ranged or something like that, but your stat line has stayed the same. So taking the gold and using that gold to buy another 2/2 out of the shop means that you've got meaningfully more stats, in a way that a Corrupted Heartwood or a Ring of Regeneration or a Book of Heroes, if you don't have a good minion to go with it yet, isn't giving you any stats.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. I think we're then moving on to tier 4 then, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So on tier 4, Wonder Waddle obviously kind of stops having a hero power to some extent. I often spend tier 4 as Wonder Waddle, still trying to assemble stag triples, pig triples, donkey triples. You do sometimes, I'll happily take a Sporko or whatever to support some of my stuff. Any of the good 4-drops, I'm not going to turn down being offered anything strong and scaling on tier 4. But for the most part, I'm rolling relatively aggressively. I'm still trying to make good use of my very powerful hero power.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll still take a Nutcracker. I'll still, there's plenty of things I will take. But my focus is still get this hero power active, head towards this hatball game plan, usually. Sometimes it hasn't happened. As Pied Piper, things get interesting, and usually I become relatively hyper-focused on Pied Piper's unbelievably strong later game.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are the best hero at assembling the best comp, which is Copy Boy.
Copy Boy's so good.
So likely, the odds that you find a copycat, massively increased. The odds that you find Good Boy at tier 6, the biggest increase. It is we'll get to it when we get to tier 6, but you are so much more likely to find Good Boy. And yeah, Copycat is really the thing I'm looking for more than anything else. The other tier 4 animals are not that exciting to me. Vulture, in particular, stands out as something that should feel really good, and I often do take. But you're not doing a summons comp, right? I'm not highly picking Wolf in Sheep Clothing and Black Cats. I'm not Geppetto. I'm not taking Princess Peep like she's anything special. This bearded vulture is fine. He's probably like a 12/12, which is above average for sure. But he's not going to stick around, and he's not a super high pick in the way that you might think he is, as one of the only cards that directly references animals with an animals hero. The other animal on tier 4 also directly mentions animals, Hungry Hippocampus. This is a little bit better. You are more likely to be offered chickens that you can just cycle if nothing else. It is going to get a little bit more extra health, and you are buying more animals than average. You're still not often doing the summons comp. It's not as good as it would be on a Geppetto, but you can it gets to a 10/10 quick enough that I'm running it a decent percentage of the time.
I would agree with both of that. The one thing I would say about Vulture is it offers a little bit of a get out if you've gone too far into Evil Queens. If you picked up that Black Cat early and then there was some Evil Queens, you grabbed it with some stats, and now you've got this board of evil units, and you know it's not going to be good enough going into tier 5 and tier 6. Grabbing a Vulture that can sort of sit next to the Evil Queen and steal a bunch of the same stats that then lets you, instead of grabbing evils, grab a baby bear and just slide that Evil Queen over to the shop, and now it's 1 gold and you're fine. And before you know it, you've actually got some good units on your comp, you've stuck some Wombats or a baby bear behind a Copycat, and you're ready to find Good Boy on tier 6. And potentially you can turn your Vulture good, but it probably shouldn't last. It should probably be a Corp Wizard by that point.
Yeah. So yeah, really tier 4 as Pied Piper, I'm also, I would pick Friendly Spirit over Hippocampal Vulture as well, because I am focused on this Good Boy late plan and I'm picking up Copycats really aggressively. I want to have a Friendly Spirit that I can cast Wormroot on. That's the stuff I'm like, I don't think you should, we've talked before, we don't hard force anything. I'm certainly closer to forcing on Pied Piper than I am on a lot of heroes, because I do think you get there. I'm not going to pass up these Copycats that I'm seeing, and I'm going to see them.
This is really interesting to me, because something I found myself doing more and more, especially in the later stages of Copy Boy, is taking fewer Friendly Spirits early and just letting Copycats sit on my bench, sit in slot 2 and 3, hoping they summon an animal, instead of hoping they attack and give +3/+3, +6/+6. elsewhere in the team, just because I haven't found it to be very strong in the mid game. And I would rather wait and get my kick of strength when I find a good boy. It's different if the Friendly Spirit's golden. Once the Friendly Spirit's golden or the Copycat's golden, then you can get there when it targets itself.
Yeah, actually, Golden Copycat is also worth mentioning because the Copy Boy comp in general is more than twice as good once your Copycats are golden, right? Like, it is...
Yes.
Golding that Copycat catapults it into a real comp.
And it happens all the time as Pied Piper. You see so many over the course of an average mid-game. And because we're aiming for this comp so much, Pied Piper, you're really hunting down those all-important Tier 2 treasures, the Hermes Boots to let you get the first attack, and the Crown of Atlas to make those copycats good. And you're never letting them go once you've got them. You found those chickens, you tripled them together. If it was anything else, you skipped. But if it's one of those two, lock it into your treasure slot. I don't care that +1/+1 isn't very good right now. It'll be enough later.
And it's probably fine anyway. You're buying random animals. It's another reason I don't lead into Evil Queen is that I really want Crown of Atlas. One last thing I want to mention is Wonder Waddle is that this is often the tier where you start, if you're not very lucky, this is often roughly when you get a mice triple, like mathematically. It's about in the tier 4 stage of the game. And here you can often find a direction from a tier 4 treasure. I mentioned that Sky Castle wasn't particularly good, but if you're in this mid-game, you haven't found Hatball, you're struggling a little bit, moving in on a Nutcracker because you have a Sky Castle can be a good pivot. And actually the very, very common pivot is Dwarven Forge. Dwarven Forge takes the usually somewhat unreliable dwarf comp and catapults it into like extremely strong, extremely powerful economy. You get to see so many treasures.
Because you've been Waddle for so long, your crafties are going to be huge.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You can pick up 2 crafties and they gold together into a 21-21, and that's fine.
Yeah, and it gives you even more looks at Hatball to pivot back out. Yeah, you can... Yeah, it's worth mentioning the dwarf pivot. It tends to happen at tier 4, can happen at tier 3. On tier 3, I'm probably more likely to take a scaling treasure. By tier 4, I'm looking for a direction treasure, and Forge is definitely one that I have an eye out for. Even if I have almost no dwarves, I'm willing to take Forge on 4 and go, okay, cool, there's a greedy in this shop. A triple greedy is massive and is going to get me economy. I can work with this. I need 2 Lordies to triple them up, and that's a late game plan. Forge is very, very strong and worth pivoting into as Wonder Waddle. Cool, heading on to tier 5 units are not incredibly exciting because the tier 5 animals tend to be summon based. And they're not, again, we're not really doing a summons comp. Baby Bear and Wombats in Disguise both do work with Copycat, but Copycat, especially a golden Copycat, can really struggle to actually make great use out of summons as much as it can make good use of mummies and friendly spirits. And we can, however, head in a Bearstein direction. If we've got like a Sting or something else that's paying us off for having a baby bear, maybe just like a Monkey's Paw, any of these various reasons that are incentives to have a baby bear.
Sting, Monkey's Paw. You can pick up a summoning portal pretty easily these days since it's a 4-drop treasure.
Sure. Yeah, baby bear in particular, because Bearstein is as likely to see as Good Boy, which is still way more than average. Yeah, it's really good odds to see a baby bear. And to see a Bearstein, and that's a huge payoff with baby bears.
And you get those odds again on seeing big pigs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's usually a bit of a dip in, like, baby bear as a unit is not great stat distribution. It's not an incredibly strong unit just then and there. So it benefits very little from +1/+1 from Pied Piper, because the 1/1 being a 2/2 is irrelevant at that stage of the game for the most part. But you can make do some work with it. Wombats in Disguise, with +1/+1, again, you get to double down on those stats. That's really cool. It's a really good unit if you triple it. Like Copycat, it gets so much more once it's tripled.
I've got to mention putting Wombats in Disguise behind a golden stag, because that happens all the time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can do some stuff with Wombats. It's just a good power spiky tier 5 unit. It's not good, so unless you have the Crown of Atlas, it's probably not going to stick around, but that's fine. Good unit, buy it, don't fall in love with it.
And this is the strength of Piper, is that you're still getting this upgraded shop with meaningfully higher chance of hitting relevant units.
Yeah.
Even once we've got to tier 5. Wonder Waddle's done with having a hero power by now. Wonder Waddle, you've either got a direction and you've done something good with it, whether that's Hatball, whether that's Dwarves, whether it's some Royals thing somewhere in between. It could be Copycat, you can do Copycat as Waddle. Lots of shots at the tier 2 treasures. You're either locked in on that or you're dead.
Yeah, and plenty of heroes in this game have an early game hero power, right? They tend to be the good ones. Fallen Angel's hero power is still okay at this stage of the game, but it's probably fallen off. You probably wanted to go go either good or evil relatively soon, and so you're only getting half your hero power. Yeah, plenty of heroes are early game focused and fall off, and often you want to dream out of those heroes. I do think Wonderwaddle has enough text in the late game that I'm not aggressively looking out to pivot out of him, because you still have the chicken economy, and you still have Polywoggles, which need some help, especially now Grimsoul is gone, rest in peace. But Polywoggle into a upgraded 6-drop is very, very strong. Almost all of the 6-drops can be pivoted into if upgraded. You might struggle a bit with Storm King if you haven't pulled off the hatball stuff, and Echo Wood can be a little rough. But for the most part, an upgraded 6-drop is very strong, very powerful direction, and by far the cheapest way to get it is flipping a Polywoggle. You spent 4 gold rather than 18. That's ridiculous.
But you didn't get a treasure, so,
Well, then I spent 2 gold.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Wonderwaddle does still have text in the late game, even if it is a little underwhelming, certainly compared to Pied Piper, who I think is one of the best late game heroes.
The distinction I want to draw is that Pied Piper is a direction. Wonderwaddle, you have to find a direction.
Yeah, I think that's true. Cool. So yeah, and finally, tier 6, Pied Piper. Again, I almost always want to be copycat good boy stuff. It's so consistent. There's still only 20 animals on tier 6, so that's 5% extra every single shot, in addition to whatever your default odds to find good boy is. And that really adds up. That's a massive increase. I think it might almost be... I think it's roughly double the odds of seeing good boy. Like, it is so much more good boys.
I've got to mention as well, it's worth buying an XP as Pied Piper in the mid game, because you're going to have such a big power spike once you see that good boy, and you're so likely to on your first couple of turns at tier 6.
Yeah, definitely true. Yeah, that's almost always my primary game plan. I've definitely also done Bearstein stuff. Bearstein can give a good boy +2/+2. It's not even, and it's a good unit. It can just be in the good boy comp once you get there. But if you were doing bears and other things with summons, totally fine. It gives you a copycats +2/+2. The important things. If you've got like an Ambrosia or something, it can be a big payoff for that. You can do Bearstein things. It is not the best late game comp. It falls off. You're only summoning 100/100s. You might have like 800/100s. Still lose to a single 1,000 Echo Wood. What are you gonna do? You've got to probably want to be the winningest comp. But if you need something faster than that, if you haven't golded that copycat yet, and you haven't really been in good, you've just been doing other middling strength things, Bearstein gets very big almost immediately. Like a single Bearstein plus Baby Bear is just a ridiculous amount of stats, in a way that an unupgraded, unbuffed good boy, even buffing 5 units, is just a 10/10.
Yeah, you're going to struggle to get there that fight. Final note about Bearstein, because I don't think we've said this on the podcast before. Syth told me this. The way to get that comp to be potentially actually competitive with multiple 100/100s is to feed your hippocampus to a crocodile.
Yeah, I definitely think that's relevant. I think crocodile is generally a thing that I'm looking out for a little bit as Pied Piper, because copycat croc is fun anyway. Copycat croc Bearstein is a lot of fun.
Oh, I hadn't even thought of putting a copycat in front of it. This is disgusting.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can have I have definitely crocked a Wombats in Disguise because I had a Bearstein and then picked up a copycat and went off. I had a great time. It's definitely not plan A. It is worth thinking about, certainly as plan B. Maybe plan C. We can find something better, but it's fun.
Plan B star.
Yeah. So yeah, that Pied Piper, very, very strong. I think it is worth mentioning that although I do strongly believe that Pied Piper is one of the best heroes in the game, my stats don't directly support that, and I think that might be because I've been a little over-focused on copycat good boy strats. So I guess kind of word of warning, I'm probably a little over-focused because it's super fun to get
It makes for great stream content as well.
It does. I've had 300 million attack good boys. You're not getting that consistently as anyone else. But yeah, I'm saying it like it's the only thing you can do, and that's absolutely not true. Ride the small amount of bonus stats you have into mid-game strength and do whatever is a fine game plan. Plenty of other heroes would take that. That's way better than Jack's Giant, even right there. Yeah, you can just ride the stats. I think it's worth being very aware of the copycat good boy game plan, certainly if you're trying to come first, but it's not always... you don't have... We've mentioned some of the other directions you can go.
Yeah, Piper's not a monolith at all. I should mention that in terms of my stats, obviously they're not up there with Matt's stats usually, but Pied Piper is the best hero in the game, because when I'm Piper, I play seriously. I think if you're out there on the ladder, if you're chasing down stats like Matt's, you could do a lot worse than take Pied Piper every time you see them.
Yeah, Pied Piper is my second highest picked hero after Apocalypse. I pick him like he's the best, certainly.
So that's all 6 tiers of gameplay. Do we have any tier 7 advice for people, other than feed your hippocampus to a croc?
So tier 7 is really just kind of narrow interactions that are worth mentioning, and Pied Piper, it is worth mentioning, is deceptively one of the worst hatball heroes, because you don't have any shop space. When you have hatball, one of the things you're often looking to pick up is a fork or a mimic, so that when you cast a spell, you get 2 new spells in the shop. And if you're playing as Pied Piper, you don't have room for a second spell in the shop. Unless you buy a chicken, unless you do something else with it, there isn't room to fork your spells. And that is a meaningful downside. It doesn't mean I'm never going for it. You're still more likely to find animal familiars. You can still do stuff with hatball. But the hyper powerful get 400 Storm Kings that other people can potentially achieve is meaningfully more difficult as Pied Piper. And given that you've got a good late game plan anyway, I would lean away from it. Does that mean I'm not going to take Merlin's hat as my first tier 3 treasure? No, treasure's really good. But I probably am less likely to take Crystal Ball unsupported. Normally, I would take Crystal Ball over something like a Sting. I think I would swap that as Pied Piper.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because if you're having to buy that chicken out of the shop, that's also lowering your APM. That's other clicks that you have to make that aren't just rolling and casting the spell.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Wonder Waddle is obviously a hatball hero, and an extra element that I didn't mention on tier 2 is Wizards Familiars are animals that triple super easily. You can easily, realistically, golden 2 of them. Like, that is quite hard to do as another hero, but you don't need that many. And given that you're picking them very highly because they're an animal that's going to give you a treasure, that's a kind of very normal on-ramp for that strategy as well.
And that makes the spells super worth it even early in the game as well.
Yeah. The one other thing with Pied Piper is locking the shop. You want to be a little bit careful, because it will prioritize adding a buffed unit over a kidnapped unit. So normally if your hand is full and you cast like a forked kidnap, cool, I get 2 of the stolen units in the shop. Pied Piper will not do that. Pied Piper's hero power believes that it is more important to add an animal with +1/+1 than it is to give you a kidnapped 100/100. So be a little bit careful with your hand space. Pied Pipers can even replace the spell in the shop. If you lock a full shop with us and you buy the spell, sometimes, I can't point to exactly when this would happen, but sometimes you can get a new animal added and then your shop is full and you have a shop without a spell. Pied Piper just really wants to give you that animal, and it's worth being a little bit more aware of your hand space when that sort of thing comes up.
Fundamentally, you're a Pied Piper. That animal is following you whether you want it to or not.
Yes.
Cool, I'm prepared to call that a show. That's our show. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on the Discord. I'm Jethro, he's Sythesys. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at 7th Tier Podcast, the number 7, the word podcast. And please do send us a tweet if you've got a play decision you weren't sure of, or a sick brag of an end board. I love to see them. I never get bored of seeing where a hatball has taken people. You can also find Syth's stream on twitch.tv/Sythesys. We'll be back next week with the same content, but we'll be saying different words. Until then, don't forget, stealing a golden chicken is cheating. Have a great week.